That's totally fair. There's a lot of names, a lot of locations, a lot of characters who go by multiple names, a lot of locations that change hands between characters. And while there is a whole chapter basically talking about the map and who runs what and how they come to the position of running whatever country, whatever kingdom they're dealing with, it's not the easiest chapter to swallow unless you are a person who like reads history textbooks for fun, which I was as a kid. So I'm going to attempt to walk you through the map of Beleriand. And the interesting thing about Beleriand is I think people forget that it is attached to Middle Earth. And the only reason why we don't see it on the Middle Earth map is because it was sunk thanks to the War of Wrath and the whole thing with Arendil's father and him acquiring his spaceship, which, yes, that's a thing. And just as a perspective thing, I saw this meme and it's a good indicator of how much land was actually lost when Beleriand was sunk. And it's quite a lot. I apologize in advance because a lot of this is just coming off the top of my head, but I do remember more or less what some of these are. Like, for example, all the way to the left, you have something called Nevrast. Nevrast was run by the king of that place was one of Galadriel's cousins. His name was Turgon. And this was kind of like not quite like the Court of Nightmares in ACOTAR, where we have like this country where this is where Turgon rules, but where he actually rules is a secret city called Gondolin. And a lot of like the trickle down of Beleriand lore and artifacts, a lot of that comes from Gondolin. So there's a lot of lore here, but basically Turgon, he rules Nevrast until he moves his kingdom to the teeny secret city of Gondolin, which is actually like one of the most powerful elf kingdoms. And its location, everything about it is a secret. If you come across it, you're not leaving. Most of the time. But as far as like Morgoth and Sauron and the orcs and the enemy is concerned, Turgon runs Nevrast, which is kind of like the Court of Nightmares and Illyria's situation versus Valaris for Rhysand, only without the apartheid state. You'll also notice a place called Minas Tirith on this map. This is not the Gondor's Minas Tirith, because that's way to the east in Middle Earth. This is what that city was named after. And then way down below, on the west side of the map, you're going to see a place called Nargothrond. Nargothrond is the place that Galadriel's brother rules, Finrod Felagund, before he gets killed in the Lay of Leithian, and then it passes to his brother Orodreth. That is a whole other thing. And Nargothrond is also a secret kingdom, but its existence is not a secret, only its location. In comparison to Gondolin, where everything about it is a secret. You're also going to see a little teeny tiny place. Hopefully your question does not block it. It's called Losgar up in the west. That is where the strife between the Fëanorian side of the House of Finwë versus Fingolfin and Finarfin's side of the family is, because this is where the ships of Alcalande are burned. So there's this whole thing called the kinslaying of Alcalande. It has nothing to do with the locations, but they have to cross like the grinding ice in order to get from Valinor to Beleriand, and the Fëanorians cross first, and then they burn the ships, which leaves the Fingolfin's people and Finarfin's people, led by Finrod Felagund, to brave the ice in a much worse way. And that's just one of the many events that goes to show that the elves are not a pure good, and this is not a story of pure good versus pure evil. This is like the center of the map and like more towards the north. At the very, very top, you have Angband. That is where Morgoth is from. If you go to Angband, you are not coming back, or at your luckiest, you're not coming back the same. So Dorthonion is a pretty important place. I can't think of off the top of my head who runs that. But below that, you have Doriath. Doriath is the kingdom of Elwë, or more colloquially, Eluthingal. Eluthingal is Luthien Tinuviel's father, and he is one of Elrond's ancestors. Turgon's actually his other ancestor, but that's another conversation for another day. Moving further east, you have places that are actually named after people, and it is easier to figure out who rules these places. The March of Maedhros and Maglor's Gap. Maedhros and Maglor, they rule their shit together. And generally, the Fëanorian brothers, like the sons of Fëanor, they tend to run together, except for Caranthir. And if I remember correctly, it's Maedhros and Maglor, they run together, and then Celegorum and Curufin, Celebrimbor's father, fuck those guys. And then the youngest, the twins, which is Amrod and Amrus, I think. It doesn't really matter. The only thing you really need to know about them is that they are redheads and that they die. Way down in the south, you have the Havens, which is kind of where you know when people like sail in, like this is where people sailed back to Valinor, but that didn't happen very often because the people who sailed away from Valinor, they did some pretty bad stuff. So it's kind of like in the Rings of Power where like you needed permission to sail back. And this is Círdan the Shipwrights area. And then I guess when Beleriand sank, it moved over to Middle Earth, and that's where the Grey Havens are. And I can't think of who runs anything here except for the River Sirion is pretty important. And this is a better view of Nargothrond. That is not at all a comprehensive tour of Beleriand, but that's a couple important places that you're going to need to keep in mind as you go. And he's going to throw a lot of names at you. He's going to throw a lot of locations at you. That's what the map is for. And honestly, it can be a lot, and that's not, and it's okay to be overwhelmed by it. Like I've been reading this book since I was 11, 12 years old. Like this book was my only company on a 25-hour drive to Florida. Like I'm obsessed with this book, so which is why I kind of know my way around.